And I guess we'll get started. I think a couple people are still connecting to audio as we get in, but thank you everyone so much for joining tonight. Tonight's event is hosted by the Pioneer Alumni Group. We are a group of dedicated Friendship Circle alumni established about 2 years ago at this point now. Our goal is really to create stronger opportunities to engage and reconnect with the Friendship Circle alumni in the young adult community, both locally when possible and now more so virtually. Friendship Circle Talks is an ongoing online speaker series that highlights stories and really thoughtful conversations about the special needs community. Today's theme is about ableism, neurodiversity, and disability pride, and I'm going to hand it over to Lenny to talk a little bit more about today's session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lenny Miller. Thanks for coming. I have the honor and privilege of introducing HCAN, or the Disability and Accessibility Action Group. They're a team of disability rights advocates, including members of various segments of the disability community and allies. And they're going to present to us, as well as Professor Krista Bialka from Villanova. Yeah.
Got it. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you inviting us this evening, and we're excited to be able to talk with you. As we mentioned, I'm going to start off with just an overview. For those of you who heard us before, this could be maybe a little bit repetitive, but I'd like to think that I'm mixing it up a little bit this time. As we go through, please ask any questions you have, and then I'll turn it over to the co-members who will talk about their experiences. So here goes the screen share. Okay. And my caption should be working. Okay, so we're gonna get into how we think and talk about disabilities. And I'd like to do that in a few different ways tonight. One is just by setting the scene. And, you know, as we know, we're in a very weird time, but under typical circumstances, this is maybe homecoming season, right? Who wants to give me a quick, what is promposal? Or homecoming proposal, I guess that I'm too old. This didn't happen when I was in high school. What's a promposal?
When you ask someone, I guess in a special way, to go to prom with you.
Exactly. Awesome, Seth. Yes. So when you ask somebody to go to prom with you in some kind of like a special way, kind of make a big scene. So I'm going to show you an example of proposal. And as I'm showing this to you, I want you to pay particular attention to who is doing the speaking, how people are being portrayed, and what message you think this promposal sends about disability.
I have a question for you.
What's your question?
A question most high schoolers anxiously wait to hear.
What is that?
I have a question.
Will you go to the prom with me? Yes!
Now that's one ecstatic teen. Michael Bartosik surprised her classmate Jonathan Ramillo, who's autistic, at school with this awesome promposal using a cookie cake topped with icing.
I did not expect that reaction at all. Like, I never cry, and like that brought tears in my eyes. It was so cute.
After several minutes of screaming with excitement, Michael asks, "So is that a yes?" Yes. Michael and Jonathan have been friends for a few years, and she wanted to treat him to something special.
I was like, I think I'm gonna ask like a special needs kid to prom. And I like talked to all my friends about it, and like some of them were like, you should do it, you should do it. And other ones were like, are you sure you want to spend your senior prom like that? And I was like, yeah, like that sounds awesome. He needs the prom experience. Like, I don't know, I just think it's fair for him to have the same experience I've had twice. So I just want to make it special.
Michael's cheerleading coach, Jean Ladner, calls the move remarkable. She's that first person that has made a step forward, and I hope that this is just the beginning and that more people are going to begin to follow her footsteps. As for the cake,
He's like, is it all for me? And I was like, no, you just share it with the class. It's for everybody.
a sweet treat leading up to a special senior prom.
Okay, so what are our reactions to this? Who is this featuring? Who's speaking? What is this saying about disability? My teacher wait time. Also, I realized I didn't.
I feel like it kind.
Go for it, Kate.
Oh, sorry, what?
Go for it.
Oh, I was gonna say, I feel like it's a nice video, but maybe it sort of emphasizes that people with any kind of disability can't experience or like won't experience the same general events that people without disabilities would.
Awesome, Kate. I mean, that's not awesome, but that's an awesome point. So when you think about who was featured, whose voices did we hear?
I don't know. I'm Alex. I was invited by Sammy. We mostly hear from the cheerleader and the cheerleading coach instead of the kid himself. So it kind of gives the voice to her, like she's doing this big heroic act and doesn't really get his side of the story.
That's excellent, Alex. Exactly, right? So it's featuring her. She's being portrayed as essentially some kind of hero or amazing person for asking this and using quotes right here, this poor kid to prom. He's a cool kid. Like, why doesn't he deserve the same prom experience as everyone else? So by not highlighting his voice, by putting him as an object of pity, it's sending the message that somebody with a disability isn't worthy of the same experiences and that they are, they're somebody that you should feel bad for, right? So what we want to do today, just to start, is to think about the messages that we receive about disability in our day-to-day life. And I want to give you tools so that when you're watching, I mean, I don't know, Inside Edition, but when you're watching the news, when you're reading something, when you're watching a movie, you can critically analyze what the message is, and then you can decide if it's a positive message or if it's a negative message. And I wanted to bring up 2 points. One, we are socialized in a way to think and talk about disability that isn't great. So I want to just recognize that as a general understanding. So what I'm about to share with you isn't coming from a place of judgment. It's just coming from a place of understanding. And again, giving you tools to equip you so that you can analyze disability critically. I also realized that I guess teaching, just like jumped in and didn't even introduce myself. So Krista Bialka, pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm associate professor of special ed at Villanova. So my work, teaching, and research has to do with disability awareness. Okay, so now we're gonna get to the tools. We know things that maybe we shouldn't say, but what could that look like? So there's 3 main ways that people talk about disability. Is it sentimental, another is the wondrous, and a third is the realistic. The first is the sentimental. So kind of like the gentleman was portrayed in this news clip right now, the object of pity, right? If you have a disability, somebody should feel bad for you, you're a charity case, and the focus is on what you can't do versus what you can do. So this is an old picture, but honestly, this sentiment still comes up again and again. The person on the left when Matthew's 18, college, and then the person on the right when Kevin's 18, he's going nowhere. So again, the idea is if you have a disability, then somebody should feel really sorry for you. The next is the wondrous. So the wondrous kind of does the opposite of what the sentimental does. Instead of making somebody the object of pity, it essentially makes them the object of inspiration. And part of you might be like, well, isn't that good to be inspiring? It's okay to be inspired by someone, but it's not okay to be inspired by someone if the only reason why you're inspired is because they're disabled. So again, thinking critically when you're watching something, is it about their disability or is it because they did something really amazing? Is it like, oh my goodness, you brushed your teeth, right? That's an everyday act. And when you're elevating somebody because they are doing an everyday act, you're invoking the wondrous rhetoric. This is sometimes called inspiration porn. And the danger in this is that it puts pressure on individuals with disabilities to basically have to, I'm going to use air quotes again, overcome their disability in order to count, right? In order to be disabled, like there's this awesome TED talk by a kid named Ben Myers. He's probably not a kid anymore. And he talks about this story, like he going to his science fair and he has a physical disability. And it's like Ben overcame his disability to go to the science fair. Well, he didn't overcome his disability. He went there with his disability, but somehow he had to transcend it in order to count. So the wondrous, like the sentimental, putting people down below, the wondrous is putting, I would say elevating, but not really, it's separating. What these two forms of rhetoric do are really separate people with disabilities out from the quote unquote norm. Are there any questions before I do the next one? And get ready because there's a quiz coming up. All right. I also have a group of adults here. I wasn't sure I covered up all the swear words, but this is a great example of the realistic rhetoric. So this is from a disability activist named Nina Tame. Definitely recommend that you follow her on Instagram. And this is a great example of the realistic rhetoric. The realistic is saying, you're a person with a disability, but you're a person, right? Disability, as I'm going to talk about in a second, is one of the many identities that we all have, or ability identity, I should say. We are made up of multiple identities. It just so happens that with disability, it can be viewed as the most salient. So if you're using the realistic rhetoric, you're not highlighting differences, but you're also not hiding them. And this example from Nina is great because she's saying, I'm disabled and I am, I'm empathetic. I'm a mom. I love the 80s. I like to swear, right? So she is a multifaceted person and disability is one part of her, but it's not the only part. So when you move forward and think about rhetoric, it's okay to recognize that the world is set up in a way that privileges people who do not have disabilities. But what it's not okay to do is to talk about people with disabilities or position them in a way that excludes or separates, right? To use language, words, or descriptions that set them as an other. You ready for your quiz? Okay. So hopefully this is going to work. I have a poll everywhere in here. And what I'm going to do, I'm showing you a picture. And in a second, I want you to guess whether this is realistic, wondrous, or sentimental rhetoric. So this is a Target ad for back to school. So you should be able to, if you have an internet-ready device or phone or something like that. I mean, you clearly have an internet-ready device. You're on your computer. So you can go to polev.com/KristaBialk301, or you can text. So you text 37607, and then you write in Krista Bialk 301, and then you enter A, B, or C.
Wondrous is a
Yeah, everything's good. How are you doing?
Could you show us the ad one more time?
Of course I can. So again, it's a Target ad. Oh, this is going backwards. There we go. It's a Target ad, and this is people wearing school uniforms. One more second. So we have a pretty decent split with, Okay. Realistic. Now here's the thing. I think you can make an argument for the other two potentially. The reason why I think realistic might be the best fit is because he is using an assistive device, but it's not hiding it. It's not highlighting it necessarily. It's there, but he's a kid wearing a uniform, just like she's a girl wearing a uniform. All right, ready for this one? So this is from Smile Train, and this says, "Save me." So I think there's a way to clear your response so that you can answer the next one. Which one do we think this is? Look at you all crushing it. Yes. Any guesses as to why it's sentimental?
I think they're trying to invoke pity by saying like, "Save me," with this like kid who's obviously disabled on the advertisement.
That's awesome, Olivia. Yeah, and I think that this is a great example. So again, trying to invoke pity. It's like a moral imperative. If you don't save this kid, you're a bad person, right? Donate money. It's okay to recognize he's a cleft palate, right? Cleft palates can cause issues with eating and some different health considerations, but you could tell that story in multiple ways. They're telling it in a way that makes you feeling sorry for him so that you will give your money. All right, so here's the last example. And not to throw my workplace under the bus. So this is from the Daily Times Neighborhood News, and it says, the Delaware County Cavaliers, a Special Olympics basketball team, was thrilled to play an exhibition game during halftime at the February 22nd Wildcats game against Butler. This was clearly pre-COVID. A welcoming crowd joined the Noble Wildcat in cheering on the Cavaliers. One player, John Abrams, even scored a three-pointer from the far corner. So do we think that this is wondrous, sentimental, or realistic? My job here is done. You all are crushing it. Yeah, right? Even scored a three-pointer from the far corner. Of course he did. He's an athlete. Like, that's what he's supposed to be doing. But the reason why it got portrayed in this way is because he has a disability, right? But if anyone's familiar, so Villanova hosts it's called the Fall Festival. It's the biggest Special Olympics, student-run Special Olympics in the world, actually. And athletes train and practice all year. That's what they do. They're athletes, Special Olympics athletes. But it shouldn't be shocking that he scored a basket. This is what he's intending to do by practicing. So it's taking his disability and elevating him. If another basketball player scored a three-pointer who was not disabled, you wouldn't have a whole news story about him, okay? So why does all of this happen? A lot of this is rooted in what's called ableism. So ableism is discrimination against or mistreatment of people with disabilities and the elevation of non-disabled people into positions of power and privilege. So that's a lot. What does that all mean? So when you think about racism, you think about the fact that racism isn't just discrimination, right? It's also recognizing that there are systems of oppression that exist that elevate some races and minoritize others and oppress others. The same thing happens with ability. So if you have a disability, there are ways that our society is constructed that privileges people who do not have a disability and disadvantages people who have a disability. So what are some ways to think about that? If you think about education, okay? If you are not already familiar, I don't know if you would be familiar with educational laws, but if you were in the United States prior to 1975 and had a disability, you were not guaranteed the right to an education. 1975! The Americans with Disabilities Act wasn't passed until 1990. So when you think about the way that our society, our government has created barriers for individuals with disabilities, it's systemic. But sometimes if you are a person who's not disabled, it can take a little while to develop that lens and really think about, wait, who is this benefiting? Who is this putting at a disadvantage, and why? I also wanted to bring up the fact that disability is intersectional. So if you have a disability, like Nina Tame in that example, it's one part of your identity. You have many parts, we all have many parts to our identity, right? We are race, our class, our gender, our sexual identity. So all of these things inform who we are and how we experience the world. So if you are a person with cerebral palsy and you are an African-American male, you could experience your cerebral palsy very differently than a white female, right? So all of these different things inform what your disability experience looks like. Disability is not homogeneous. All of these different factors come into play. And I have a quote here from Amani Barbarin, a Philadelphia native and disability activist, who I also recommend you follow because she's fantastic. And she says, "I would like to see more disabled Black people in film and TV, please." So this is another really important point to bring up. If you think about disability representation, of which there is very limited representation, I think it's like 4% of characters in film and TV are disabled, often played by non-disabled folks. If you do see these individuals with disabilities featured in a television show or in a movie, they're usually white and they're usually heterosexual. So there's a lot of heteronormativity around disability, and there's a lot of assumptions about over-representation of race, of being white, okay? So when you're encountering an image of somebody with a disability in a film or a television show, think about who is playing that part. Are they disabled? Are they not disabled? And what are the other identities that are represented? Any questions? Okay. All right. So a lot of what I'm talking about has to do with physical disabilities, but it's also really important to remember that disability is also what you can't see. So there are plenty of disabilities out there, mental health, again, all different learning disabilities, ADHD, all different disabilities that you can't see. And while people with physical disabilities can encounter marginalization and oppression, people with invisible disabilities can encounter different forms of marginalization and oppression, especially as related to legitimacy. The idea of seeing is believing. So if you can't, think about, like, put yourself in a position of seeing somebody, and I have done this, right? I'm at the mall and I see somebody pull into an accessible parking spot and they step out of their car. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, why are you using that spot? You don't need that spot, right? That's what's going through my head. How do I know that that person doesn't have a chronic illness or some other disability that they might need that spot, right? It's also important to recognize that disability can be variable and mobility can be variable. So some days, some people need to use a wheelchair. Other days maybe, and it totally can be context dependent. Other days maybe arm braces make more sense, or a cane. But sometimes people can face issues related to legitimacy because they're not using an assistive device at one point in time, or they're using a different one. And it's like, well, do you really need that? So addressing legitimacy is also really important. And I have 2 cartoons to highlight that, and or 4, I should say. So when you think about things that you would literally never say to somebody with a physical disability or physical difference, but you might say to somebody with a mental health condition or invisible disability. So you have this person lying down in bed and he's like, I get you have food poisoning and all, but you at least have to make an effort. Or the person who cut his hand off. You just need to change your frame of mind, then you'll feel better. Who might hear something like that? What disability can you think of?
Obsessive compulsive.
Awesome, Jake. Yes, obsessive compulsive disorder. It's like, no, just like don't think about it. Like, no, you're worrying too much, okay? Do you really need to do that? Somebody with anxiety, somebody with depression. If you have depression, that is a mental health condition, right? And you can't just like snap your fingers and not be depressed, or say, oh, go on a walk and then everything will be fine, right? And sometimes mental health conditions especially are treated that way. And then I'll look at the one on the bottom right. I don't think that it's healthy that you have to take medication every day just to feel normal. Don't you worry that it's changing you from who you really are? So you might not, like, I have a blood clotting disorder. If I'm taking my Lovenox, right, you wouldn't say to me like, well, Krista, do you really need to be taking that for your blood clotting, right? Because you're like, oh, well, she has a blood clotting disorder, that's what she needs to take. But you might say it to me if I'm taking medication for ADHD, or if I am taking medication for depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder. So there are a lot of different issues that people can encounter related to invisible disability. A point that I wanted to bring up that's really important is ableism in our everyday lives, right? So we're COVID tired, COVID exhausted, COVID fatigue, all of the terms, right? People are frustrated that they can't maybe go to their favorite restaurant or hang out with their friends or do things that they are used to doing in typical circumstances. Now think about this. There are so many instances when individuals with disabilities live this as their everyday life. They want to go places, but maybe because of sensory issues, maybe because of physical accessibility, maybe because of a mental health consideration, they don't have access to those spaces, okay? So this is from a disability activist named Sophie Butler. Also recommend you follow her because she's awesome. And she said, I wonder now that COVID lockdown has given non-disabled people the tiniest glimpse into the societal issues disabled people have been fighting for years, whether our community will be supported, amplified, or even just listened to. So again, the idea that things that many non-disabled people are quote unquote over are things that people with disabilities live with in their everyday life and are often overlooked. So ready for your last quiz? This is the last thing that I want you to think about. What I've done, if anyone's familiar with Peggy McIntosh, she has a fantastic piece called The Invisible Knapsack, and she talks about race. And I've used race a couple times as a counterpoint, not because I'm trying to equate race and disability, but because there are a lot of strong constructs related to race that are sometimes relatable and understandable when you apply them to ability. So it's like, forget everything I said about intersectionality and just focus on your one identity. But what Peggy McIntosh does is she has a series of different questions that she asks people to consider as related to their racial identity. So I've taken her questions and I've adapted them to think about ability. So I'm going to ask you 10 different questions. And as we go through, I want you to keep count, mental, write down on a piece of paper, whatever you want to do, what number you end up with at the end of this count. So if it's a yes for this question, then you can have a +1. If it's a no, it's a -1, okay? So any questions? Okay, so the first question is, or first statement I should say, when I'm told about our nation's history, I'm shown that people of my ability status made it what it is. So again, you're thinking about your ability status, whether you identify as disabled or non-disabled, and if that ability is reflected here. I'm never asked to speak for all the people of my ability group. I can turn on the television or open to the front page of my internet browser and see people of my ability group widely and positively represented. I can easily buy posters, birthday cards, children's books, dolls, toys, and magazines featuring people of my ability group. I can go home from most meetings or organizations I belong to feeling somewhat tied in rather than isolated, out of place, outnumbered, unheard, held at a distance, or feared. When I decided where to live, I didn't have to consider whether there were any steps or specific accommodations to the bathroom, and I had many options that I could consider based on my ability to enter the home and use all aspects of the bathroom as the only criteria. When I'm interested in attending an event or going out to a restaurant, again, imagine yourself in a non-COVID world, I don't have to make any phone calls or do research to find out if the space is accessible to me. I've never been yelled at or called out because I don't appear to be disabled. I don't worry about how people will treat me differently if and when they find out about my disability if it isn't obvious when they first meet me. I get invited to participate in activities regularly because my friends and family don't have to make any special considerations about places or spaces I can access. So right now you should be coming up with a general score where you think you fall. All right, your last poll. What was your score? So if you had between a 10 or a 9, 8 or a 6, 5 or a 3, 2 to 0, or -1 or below. This is awesome. So if we look at the scores, we do have the majority of people in anywhere between a 10 and a 6, right? So above average. My hope is after this, little presentation that we gave and with the accompanying conversation that we're about to have, that you can take a step back and think about ability in your own life and accessibility, and think about the barriers that people with disabilities might encounter and how you as an individual can work to identify those barriers and potentially advocate and remove those barriers. Okay? That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Do you want us to just hop in ourselves now? Or do you want to, I guess there's nothing else to do for an introduction. So can I just start talking? Is that all right?
Yeah, no, go for it. Krista, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Krista. Because every single time I've seen that, and I've seen that a lot now, like I still always get something new out of that, Krista. That's awesome. Let me introduce myself first, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues to introduce themselves as well. I'm Nadine Silber, and I am affiliated with HCAN as a disability rights activist because I am an autistic adult, and I'm also a trauma survivor, and so I also have PTSD. But most of the things that I talk about are about being autistic. I'm also the parent of 2 wonderful Friendship Circle members who are also autistic, Ethan and Aaron Silber, who you may know. Or actually, you probably don't know because you're alumni. but anyway, they love Friendship Circle, and so I think this is a wonderful group. And then I have also with me my fellow teammates and friends, Barbara and Caroline. Are you there somewhere?
I unmuted myself. Hi, I'm Barbara Whitman. I'm part of this group. I have a physical disability that affects the way I walk. I can't do stairs or curbs. I use wheelchair at times, and I use forearm crutches, so I have balance. I was born in 1975, so I'm actually probably one of the first generations to experience the real school experience. And boy, was that an experience. If you guys have questions later about that, I can go into that. But I know things are different now, so that's good. But that's my introduction. Oh, I'm also a software engineer at Comcast. And I got 2 dogs.
Very horrible dog. Caroline, are you there too?
I'm here. I just unmuted myself. Hopefully y'all can hear me well. If I'm too soft or I'm too loud, please let me know. Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline Borgia. I'm autistic, and that's mainly what I talk about, but I also have ADHD too. And I'm a Friendship Circle alumni as well, on both sides of the image.
Okay, so what we were thinking, because, you know, based upon the way that Friendship Circle works, with just a lot of relationships building, you know, and a lot of connection between people, disabled and non-disabled, that maybe you would just like to talk instead of doing like a formal presentation. Maybe you'd like to talk. I'd like to ask you some questions. That's probably a switch. Actually, not really, because Krista just asked you a bunch of questions. But I wanted to know from the alumni, I had a few questions for you if you're comfortable answering them. And we wanted to know if you had any questions for us, because we're very comfortable. And if you ever, you know, wanted to know something, we're in a position to be able to share our own lived experience, at least. And we don't speak for all of the people with their own disabilities, or let alone the disability community, but we can talk to some common themes, speak to some common themes like, you know, dignity, respect, diversity, and, you know, the need to counteract ableism. So if that's okay with you, I had some questions. I think Caroline and maybe Barbara, you had some questions for them. Could we just ask?
Sure. Yeah, I don't see why not.
I wanted to know, since you were all in Friendship Circle, do you now, at this point in your lives, do you have a friendship connection or some other connection with members of the disability community, with disabled people? Do you maintain some kind of connection with the disability community in some way?
I can go first. I guess not. My short answer is not as much as I would like to. Part of the reason that we had started this group was to increase, I guess, the amount of easy to just tap into opportunities like that to do so. John, who's on the call, and I worked together with Riffy at the Friendship Circle, and we'll keep in touch kind of loosely through Facebook. You know, what's new, what's up to date, maybe send each other the occasional chat here and there, but I wish it was a bigger part, and that was one of the core reasons that we started this group, to see what, you know, and I guess the silver lining, if you had to find it with COVID, is that, you know, we're starting more virtual opportunities, and there's a, you know, a huge kind of untapped world of more things that we can do with that.
Absolutely. Just to add on to that really quickly, if you are interested in connecting more, I know, like, speaking for a lot of people within the autistic community, that's one way that for many, many years, since the internet's been around, we've all connected online, you know, not all people, but I mean, like, a lot of people have connected online that way. So if you ever want to be directed to resources online and everything where you can, you know, interact with autistic culture, you know, you can just ask, and I'll be happy to send them. But does anybody else want to offer any insight? It's not a judgment thing either. It's not like, well, I'm just curious to know how much contact you have in your daily lives, you know, with members of the disability community. Is it something that you have to seek out, or do you know disabled people?
Yeah, I always love talking about this because it's definitely a highlight of my week, but I am lucky enough to still be in touch with my good friend, Stephen Bomsey. Him and I have been jamming every week just about for the past like 5 or 6 years, something like that. And
awesome.
It's still,
you had a great friendship. Okay.
Yeah, it's really great. And yeah, I mean, we bond over music. And now since I'm at college and, you know, all the COVID stuff is going on, I'll kind of make more of a, I'll get a little group together, you know, sometimes a little kind of band thing, and yeah, we'll still jam songs that we all enjoy. Beatles, and Beatles is a big one. Bruce Springsteen. Yeah, it's a great time. So I do.
I love hearing that. Yeah, that's wonderful. So you really made a really long-lasting friendship, and I love that. So it's good. It's good to hear. So, that was my question. I don't want to like monopolize here. So Barbara or Caroline, you had questions too, right?
Well, I was just wondering if anybody's noticed anything in the 10 years that you guys were doing this, or 5 years, I'm not sure how long you've been out of the friendship circle, but have you seen a difference either in the way disabled people are treated or accessibility, things that are in the news? Have you noticed an increase or decrease, positive, negative, responses to the disability community as a whole since you were in the friendship circle?
I can say that in my experience, because Friendship Circle has been such a big part of my life, and then it affects the people around me. So the people who are really important to me have changed their perspective and have had new and different interactions with people with disabilities. So I've seen it affected in my life just because the people I choose to be around are people who are accepting that way and are going out of their way to learn either from my experience or just from new and different people. So that's what I've found.
That's good. I like that. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll say something. My name's John. Sam invited me. I work with her at Fluid Edge. I think this is great. What you guys have going on here. I never heard of this. I have a special needs uncle. He's had like a bunch of brain surgeries. He's older. He's probably like 60. He's disabled enough to not be able to live on his own. He lives with my grandmother, and we take care of him. And it's always just been part of my life. You know, I try to incorporate him in as much as possible. See him once a week. I've moved a couple weeks ago, so I haven't seen him. So this is just a reminder. I need to go hang out with him a little bit more. But I think this is great, and I just want to say thank you for letting me be a guest. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Alex. Sammy also invited me. I have a kind of random question, and I just want to know from the point of view of an autistic person, I don't know how to phrase this correctly. What do you think about the show Love on the Spectrum, if you've seen it?
What do I think about what?
The show Love on the Spectrum. About the love stories. And I just want to know, like, I have a cousin that's autistic, and I was like, just wondering, do you appreciate them drawing attention to autistic love completely focused on just autistic people, or would you have preferred that it's more natural and less like focused on that? Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
That they bring attention to the fact that they're neurodivergent, like that. Yeah. So it's only, yeah. I mean, actually it's really cool that you asked that question, because that's a topic that was a big topic of conversation within a lot of segments of the autistic community. And so there's no like really one answer to that, to tell you the truth, but it's something that we were definitely thinking about, you know, because on one hand, a lot of everybody, well, first of all, everybody who's autistic is different, you know that, but we have a lot of common ways of communicating and a lot of common, you know, ways of perceiving the world. And they are very different than neurotypical people. And so I think that personally, I think that, like, to a certain extent, I'm happy to see different ways of being and different ways of interacting portrayed by real autistic people, like, say, rather than an actor, like it's like non-autistic actors who they get to play these roles. So there's that. But also, yeah, it does kind of just sort of put us off again and separate us, you know, like we interact with people who are not autistic too, you know, and it's not always easy dating and being autistic, but, you know, it's not really something you necessarily want to be scrutinized like that. Yeah. And so, so I think there are positives to it as far as making people aware that even when someone isn't impacted, but it isn't autistic in a way that is very visible to other people, say perhaps because they're not speaking, you know, maybe they're typing people or something. So if you can't see their autism, so to speak, you know, they think that it's not, it doesn't impact them in a way that makes them perceive things very differently. Does that make sense? I mean, so in other words, I like that they show that autistic people are different in many ways, and that difference is, you know, is there, you know, even if you can't see it as obviously, those differences are there. But on the same time, I don't want them to be pathologized, you know, or you know, or just made into entertainment that way, you know. So, I don't know, Caroline, how do you feel about that? Because Caroline and I are both autistic, but we have we're from different generations, and, you know, and different experiences and everything, and so we may have totally different opinions on this.
I personally haven't watched it, so take that to heart when I say this. But it's like, I feel mixed about it, because, like, while I like that they're highlighting it, I also wish that they highlighted it amongst many other different people, like with many other disabilities, maybe other like people who are not neurodiverse. Like, and just take that to heart. And also, I think kind of unrelated, kind of not, just a message I want to get out there. I think it's really important that you listen to people who have both opinions.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Or that, et cetera. Listen to both sides of the argument.
Yeah, I agree. And we don't always agree. But I always respect, you know, anything that we just, you know, when I always know it's always just a different perspective and so, and everything. Yeah, but I hope I always respect. If I ever disrespect you, Caroline, tell me. Okay, so, but yeah, so, but it's really cool that you thought about that. I really appreciate that you thought about it.
Thank you for answering it. Sorry if I didn't phrase it the best.
No. I'm sorry if I didn't answer it that clearly.
No, perfect. I was just honestly curious because it seemed a little bit like they were putting it on this pedestal and drawing attention for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. And I just
yeah, it wasn't really a great way to show nerd. There was a cool movie that was out. Oh God, what was it called now? It was. I'll have to, that doesn't help you at all that I don't know the name of it, but it was like a love story that it had two autistic people in it, and it was a more natural love story, even though they were both autistic. They were autistic in very different ways, and it had a whole story behind it, you know what I mean? So there was more to it. It wasn't just sort of scrutinizing autistic people attempting to date, you know. So if I can remember the name of it, I'll tell you, or I'll email it to somebody or something. But it was really very good.
Thank you for answering.
Oh, you're welcome. If you want to know anything about Atypical, though, or the Good Doctor or whatever like that, those are not popular in the autistic community because they're stereotypes and they're not portrayed by autistic actors.
I have a quick question, if that's okay. So I have two people in my life that are we're pretty close with that are autistic. One's a cousin of mine and one's a pretty close family friend. I was just curious how, you know, my cousin who's autistic, he is, they're both pretty high functioning, but one was embraced in their family, I guess. And the other one was not ignored, but I don't know if they.
I know what you mean. You don't even have to. I know what you mean. Exactly.
I'm just curious how much you think, like in terms of the functionality of somebody that has developmental disabilities like autism or whatever it may be, how you think, how important being raised and the proper, being raised affects the outcome of how functional you are and how you like that kind of thing. That's for Nadine, Caroline, for anybody, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's critical. It's absolutely critical. My two sons are different. Well, first of all, this is just a little thing, but a lot of autistic people, and some people may disagree, but we don't tend to use functioning labels. We just usually say needs higher support needs, has higher support, because saying high functioning, low functioning is a little bit deceptive with autism actually, because autism, you can be very verbal. You can speak very well, you know, and be able to do a lot of verbal things and not be able to tie your shoes or read a map. I can't tie my shoes very well. I can't read a map, but I have a law degree. Okay. So you can have really good skills in one area and have a lot of challenges in another area. And so to say, I need supports to live, even though I'm well educated and everything. So so to say high function, it's a little deceptive because there are people who don't speak. They may need support. They still also may need a lot of support to live and everything, but they can tie their shoes. You know what I mean? So you have differences. And so clearly there are people who do need a lot more support, and there's no question, you know what I mean? Because, you know, the world is a speaking world generally, and it takes time to type and everything like that. And so as far as support needs, that's the more preferred, more comfortable way for a lot of autistic people to say, just say needs more support, less support. But I'm not gonna, you know.
No, yeah, I'm glad you said something.
Yes, but absolutely to your point, it's so critical. I can't even express it. And my two sons, one of my sons needs more support and is going to need support for the rest of his life and everything. But we've always just, you know, so what? You just treat him, you know, he's our son, you know what I mean? So we love him and we accept him. We learn to communicate too, because his way of communicating, it just may be different, but it's not wrong, you know? So we just, made it natural for him to be him, and never said, you can't do this, you can't do that, and you must do this differently and everything. And so it made a huge difference because he advocates for himself. He advocates for his classmates. He is a kind human being and a helpful human being who likes himself and has goals and plans and everything, and he knows exactly what he wants to do. And so the fact that he has self-worth and self-esteem and self-confidence and he believes in his future, of course, it's a huge, huge difference. And there are people who did not have that experience, and it impacted them in a very significant way. My childhood was not very supportive. I'm not blame, we're talking about trauma or anything like that, but like, it was not a time when people really understood autism very well, or, people even diagnosed it appropriately. And so, it was just a different experience, and it's impacted me for my entire life. And there are studies about how many, very, very many people, especially older autistic people, have post-traumatic stress disorder. It's much higher than in the general community. And so, you experience trauma, and so trauma impacts everyone and everything. And not feeling that love and not feeling that acceptance or feeling othered is not something that you don't always carry with you. For the rest of your life, you carry pain with you. And of course it affects you. And so I think definitely, and it's not that parents, this is not a blame thing for parents. I think parents are frightened when their kids get diagnosed because there's a culture of fear around autism. Every month, every April is like a hell month, for autistic people, because, every commercial on TV is about the 1 in 69, like we make it sound like we're part of an epidemic, that, this is a tragedy. And so parents who have newly diagnosed kids, this is the first thing that they're shown by developmental pediatricians, by the media and everything, is that this is a tragedy. You must fix this. If you intervene early, if you give them this medicine, if you do this 1,000 hours of, therapy and everything like that, you can make them normal. And so that's what parents see. And when they don't understand autism from the inside, they react to that fear. And sometimes they overcome that fear because they connect with members of the autistic adult community, and we say, chill out, don't be scared. We were that kid. I swear to God, I was that kid, when I was 5 and everything. And so they, my power's dying. So anyway, so the point is sometimes they get over that initial fear and things get better and things are easier. And sometimes they get stuck in that fear. And that's when I think people have a hard time. And it's not necessarily that, I'm not saying that they're bad parents. It may be that they love their kids so much and they are just so afraid they want to help that kid, so much that, it's just, they can't get through that fear into the place where they really believe and they can see him or see her as a person, So that's not a judgment thing. It's a statement about how attitudes need to change, and how people need to see autistic people as full people, not half of a neurotypical person.
I just have a quick follow-up. Real quick.
Okay.
Is it okay if I ask a quick follow-up? Do you guys mind? No? Okay, cool. No. So at a young age, at like 5th grade, I was diagnosed with like learning differences and an ADD, and I went to like a person, I forget what they're called, and they were like, I don't recommend you go to college. I went to a school that was like for kids with learning differences. I was just curious what you guys thought about labels and stuff like that, because as soon as I got that label of like ADD, a learning difference, I think not only did my confidence shoot down a lot, but sometimes I think about if I could go back in time, if my parents sent me to a public school and I just kind of learned from there. I was just curious what all 3 of you, all your aspects were, what your thoughts were on the aspects of like labels and stuff like that.
Well, I'm gonna let Caroline answer first because I talk so much at this point. My phone's actually dying, so like somebody else can talk and not just me anymore. So Caroline, and Barbara, what do you think about labels?
So in terms of labels, I think I see both sides of the argument. Like I think depending on how the label is perceived, or not perceived, perceived's the wrong word. It's like how it's like put on you. Like in your instance, they told you that you want to be able to go to college. I think that personally, adding that to it made it a lot worse. I think it's the surrounding stuff that can make the label bad too, and like what we fear everyone else might say. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of people who are comforted by a label. Like they're not sure what exactly is making them different all this time, and they want an answer. And when they have that label of autism or ADHD, I notice that they calm down a bit and they start to like grow more in their mold.
How do you feel personally about like label, like autism?
I feel both, honestly. Again, depends on the connotation.
I love my label because I've embraced it at this point. I think I was ashamed of it when I was younger. And well, actually, I didn't get my autistic diagnosis until I was actually older, because I was diagnosed with learning disabilities and behavioral problems and everything, because they didn't diagnose autism very readily and easily back then, especially for girls. So when I finally did get my proper diagnosis when I was older, I was in my 20s, I was like, wow, I didn't know what to do with that for a while. But when I found out, eventually connected with more autistic people, and I started to see, wow, you do that too? Oh my gosh, I thought I was just weird. I was trying to hide that. I felt like I was crazy, and I felt like I was stupid. And I felt like, this is something I should be ashamed of and everything like that. But then when I saw that I had a whole community of other people who did that stuff, and it was just normal for us. That's what we do. That's how we are, and we're different. And I started to think about the social model of disability, which is that people are different. And, and you're not doing it wrong because you need this extra support to do something. You're just doing it and you just need support to do it. So when I started thinking about it differently, I got to be proud of being autistic. Now I tell everybody, I disclose to everybody, I don't hide my stimming, and everything like that. And so now I love it and embrace it, but I had to change my own attitude. And now I have to change my attitude. I have to change other people's attitudes, because I do still get talked down to. I've had people pat me on the back and say, good job. I've had people high five me. I'm like 52 years old, and and so like so people's perceptions of autism are not accurate. And so I'm doing my best to change perceptions, because I'm not ashamed of it anymore. So I think that goes to what Carolyn's kind of saying. So it is a complex feeling. I don't like other people putting me down for it or limiting me for it, but I'm proud of who I am. I like my brain that's wonky and, wired differently. I wouldn't even say wonky, it's just wired differently, And so, yeah, so I'm good with it. And Barbara's in a totally different position, because she has her disability is something that has always been visible, and so it's not something she can has a choice about. People see that she has differences and everything, and
I also have an identical twin who doesn't have my disability. She's able-bodied. So going through school for my sister and I was quite different, because when we both started school, I didn't walk. And I didn't talk very well, because my tongue was also affected by my muscle disability. So they immediately put me in the lower classes, because they assumed I needed more support. And so people would compare us and be like, why is she not with you? And so the R word was always used on me all through school. And then I had to prove to the teachers that I could probably try these classes, like algebra, but I do have a learning disability, not diagnosed, but I know that I struggle more learning some pretty basic things when it comes to comparing myself to see. I even do it to myself. I compare myself to my sister, and see how quickly she's able to pick up the things, and I'm just not able to. So I do think labels as growing up is a big deal. And I was always trying to hide my disability too, or at least minimize it. I didn't use any assistive devices up until I was in my 20s. And then, and it wasn't until 2016 that I actually used the assistive device walking into an interview for a job. I did not do that before, and I was constantly falling over and trying to catch myself and not looking like I'm gonna hurt myself in their office. But when I got the job, when they offered me the job, I realized I didn't have to worry about that anymore. So kind of things are kind of coming around for me too. And I met other people with my disability, and like Nadine said, I was like, these people look just like me.
It feels good.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but you know, I don't like people who have misconceptions though, or stereotypes. You know, like that's what we kind of are doing. Our work is about, is trying to have people see us as people. You know, and so like when a label is used to try to say every kid with blah 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 diagnosis does this, and this is the end, this is how you're supposed to be, and they stop seeing us as individuals, then that's a bad thing. But just having that difference as an identified difference shouldn't be something we're ever you know embarrassed of or ashamed about or anything, because it's just a natural way of being.
Well, I think as a child, you struggle with that no matter what you're around, or you know who you're surrounded by, whether it's a positive energy or a negative energy. I think you're always, you know, a child who has a difference is always going to know they have a difference until they can accept it in some way or form. You know, and you don't do that until you're older. So it is interesting.
I hate to cut everyone short, but I think we're just past the time there, and I want to be conscious of everyone's scheduling. But thank you for everyone for joining today, and of course, thank you so much to our presenters, to our panel speakers, and everyone for joining as well. I got a lot out of this session, so I really appreciate everyone taking the time to set it aside for tonight. If you have any questions or want more information about the Pioneer Alumni Group, upcoming events, we are definitely going to be doing more of these in the future, and we would love to have you all again at some point down the road. But please feel free to reach out to us. It's alumni@phillyfriendship.com. And if anybody else has any other closing remarks, just thank you one more time and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you very much for having
me. Send me that thing where you virtually talk to, you can like connect with kids and adults with developmental disabilities.
Yeah, I can look. Well, most of the groups I get into are autistic adults, but if you want, I can do some. I'll ask around, because a lot of people, you know, we have a lot of different connected groups and everything like that. You're just looking for groups of other adults who have like a diagnosis of just a general, like it could be like anything like ADHD or learning differences or autism. Yeah, well, sure, of course, I can find something for you. I'll just get, because okay, if Lenny gives me your email address, then I'll or else I can send through Lenny, or however you want me to get that to you. I'll be happy to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
I can give you my email. Lenny can give it to you. I can give it to you. Whatever. Lenny's got it. Lenny's the best.
Okay. All right. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, guys.
So
really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Bye. I hope I let you guys talk. Bye. Bye. All right. Bye. Bye. All right.
See you, Rabbi Zeb.
Oh yeah. Hi.